you for joining us today for the AIME Women's Mortgage Network's Growth Series. In honor of our celebration of our amazing mortgage moms, we have 3 women brokers who are going to share their insights on working with their children. Let's meet our guests. We have Corrina Carter, broker owner of CMS Mortgage Solutions. We have Angie Kelson, broker owner of Moapa Valley Mortgage, and Melissa Puckett, broker owner of Nexus Mortgage Lending. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. And boy, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So let's dive right into this. Corrina, all right, take us back. Take us back of, you're running your company, you have your children growing up. Obviously, they're witnessing you grow your own company. At what point did that kind of conversation come around of that moment in time when it's, hey, maybe you should join me and we can do this together? When did that happen?
It never happened. So I have to be honest, Laura, it was forcefully fed in some situations. So I'll go back with just originating when I was a branch manager for another company. My daughter came in out of high school and helped out before I opened my company. And she was like, I don't want to be part of this. And I was like, well, you need a job out of high school so you can do a couple things around here. And she started ordering payoffs, doing homeowners, and, just all that little bit of stuff. And needless to say, at 18, that wasn't really the right fit for us, so therefore, she probably quit twice and got fired twice during that time frame. And she went home, sat on the couch for a couple months. I said, you're not doing that either. Come back into the office. I put a resume together for her, and we shopped it out to quite a few different avenues within, I forget who it was back then. It wasn't Indeed. It might have been Indeed, but I don't think so. And she got a couple callbacks, and one was a servicing company. And she went in for the interview and she got the job, and she called me at 18 and said, Mom, what does overqualified mean? Because of the things that I was teaching her in our position of just ordering payoffs, homeowner. She thought I was just making her do gopher work and doing all the stuff that I didn't want to do. And I was like, no, this is a real position. So she ended up working for a servicing company for 4 years. So, and then after that got into accounting for about another 12 years. And finally, my daughter came back to work with us 3 years ago after my son worked for me. So that's a little bit more of the story that we can go into once you get around to the other girls. But then Deshaun came to work for me. Same situation, a little bit out of college, but senior in college, and said, okay, you don't know what you're going to do. So come into the office. We're going to put you to work. And he was like, both of them, I'm never doing this. And needless to say, here we are.
Why do I think every one of us can say that exact same story, right?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. All right. So Angie, did you have that conversation, or was it a similar situation as Corrina?
Well, I did mortgages for about 10 years before I decided to open my own broker shop. And when I did open it, my whole goal was to get my daughter to work with me. So she reluctantly said that she would. And she was engaged at the time, and her husband had just graduated college with a 4-year degree in, I'm not even sure, business management or something. And so I talked him to coming over as well when I opened my broker shop as a new loan officer. And so when I opened my broker shop, it was me, my daughter, and my son-in-law. My husband does the behind the scenes, deals with the state and all the compliance stuff, but it's us 3 that run the shop. And then about a year later, I had a sister that came to me and wanted to be a loan officer. So she started about 2 years ago. And then just this year, another sister and my son came on as loan officers. So I have one employee that's my assistant, and she is the only one that's not a family member.
Wow, that is incredible. Wow. So when you were thinking of opening up your broker shop, the whole plan was I want it to be something where I do with my family, right?
Yes, that and I wanted a processor that I knew my clients would love. And my daughter is so sweet, and anybody that meets her adores her. So I knew that if I had her with me, that people can't help but fall in love with her. She's just a sweetheart. So she doesn't like to do the phone calls, and there's a lot of things she doesn't like to do, but so I keep her doing the things that she likes and that she's good at, and it works well.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, yeah. Melissa, how did you bring the family in?
Well, so I have always been a part of family business in some way, shape, or form since I was little. So my parents have always owned their own business. I, of course, branched out when I was old enough to leave the nest. And a few years later, my mom called and said, hey, we're doing this new venture. We're going to do this brokerage. Would you be interested in coming back? And I was like, Corrina and Angie's kids. I was the one that was like, I mean, I don't really want to do this, but I did it. So I've always been with family. And then fast forward, gosh, probably 16 years later, within my same brokerage. So my mother and I are co-owners of our brokerage. And I had been needing I needed a mini me is what I kept saying. I'm like, I need a mini me. And we've had processors that have been dear friends of ours that have worked for us, amazing. And I adore her. But, my mom and her are a little older and they work better together. And I was like, I need some fresh blood here. And the first person I thought of was my daughter, who is now 22. Mm-hmm. And I was really reluctant at first. I was like, oh my goodness, do I really want to do this? I mean, I know family business, family dynamics, and I should say my daughter is actually my stepdaughter. So, she hasn't been around that her whole life, but I really did some soul searching and some digging and discovered that, I think she would be a valuable asset to my business. And so, of course, same thing. I approached her and I said, hey, what do you think about this? And she was like, well, I need to think about it. So I thought it was really sweet. She went and talked to my dad. She went and talked to Grandpa and said, what do you think? And he said, well, sweetie, I think this could be a career for you. And so she came on, and it'll be a year next month that she's been here. And it's amazing. It's so fun. I love working in a family business. And I realize not everybody has that ability. Yeah. Not everybody can do that. No. But I've just been really blessed with that.
Yeah. And that's my next question that we're going to dive into for each of you, right? Because you teed that up perfectly there, Melissa, because you are correct. There's lots of people that, although the concept in their mind is, oh, it would be great if we could work together as a family, but we know it's not always works out the way you expect. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm somebody that I'm blessed that it's successful, but that's not always the case. So let's dive into what is it like, and has it changed your relationship with your family in how you interact, not just at work, right? We know work is work, but what about outside? What has that dynamic turned into? And is it a positive, or is it, where do you separate the line, right? To where there is. And I'm going to save my next question for you guys. There is a difference of working for your mom. I know that. So we'll circle that after. Tell me about what the dynamic is like, Corrina, working with them.
So for me, I believe I have two different ones. With me and my son, he helps me run the operation. So he's in the day-to-day weeds. He does everything from ground zero to hero. So with him, he shuts it off quicker. So he definitely we can go into the war room, we call it, and we can come out and say, what's for dinner? Now, with my daughter, she is definitely in a position to where she doesn't want to be involved outside of work. What I mean by that is she has a hard time being involved in the day-to-day process because she feels like there is too much dynamics there. She doesn't shut it off as much at times, and at some point in time, for 4 years, we were living and working together. So now that was a little different with having the kids around and having her do her daily jobs. And it was just like, okay, I'm not involved in that process, so I don't need to hear about it. And not in a bad way, but it's because we have those dynamics that me and Deshawn can like turn off and on. And for her, she carries it over a little bit more. So she would be in that process of making sure she's doing the right thing at the right time and what she needs to do versus, just kind of leave whatever we talked about behind and move on to the next journey. So she has that, I want to use the term accounting mindset where everything has to match up, right? And in mortgages, everything doesn't match up. And we can change on the drop of a dime of what our process is. So, or what our workflow may be. So that is definitely not her forte, but maybe more so on Deshawn's. So we have a different dynamic there when we go home. Me and Deshawn can flow a little conversation here and there when we want to, and sometimes cut it off. And for her, it's more or less we choose what those topics are going to be when, because I just don't want them to carry over until the next day, and making sure that she understands that that is just our process here at work and what we do, and then home is totally different. So that's probably going to be a little bit more on your next conversation.
Yeah.
The question that you're going to ask
about the mom. But Corrina, very good point of explaining that, because what you've recognized is that it is unique depending on the individual. There is no one size fits all of this is how you work with your grown children or your sister or your mother or whoever it is, right? There is no, this is the box that it fits into. You have to, and you're right. And I can appreciate everything you just said, because you're right. There's some people that they need to have that separation and need to have that boundary, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And then there's others that can flow into the conversation, but then switch and it's over. So I love that you've recognized that. And that's probably why you're successful at working with your family, because of that. Love it. All right. Angie, how has the dynamic worked? Now you have other, right? So you have sisters, you have children, right? You have in-laws, right? You have a combination happening here. So lots of different dynamic. How do you work with each of them? And what has that led to your relationship with them outside of work?
So I would say that with my daughter, well, what I've had to do is I've had to look at everybody's strengths and make sure that they're doing things that need to be done according to their strength. So my daughter is very detailed. She's great at insurances. She's great at approvals. She's great at making the client feel very comfortable and that they're important and they're cared for. She's great at that. She does not like phone calls. She does not like confrontation. So my assistant, who's not a family member, but she's wonderful, she has no fear of phone calls and she has no fear of confrontation. And so if there's anything like that that comes along, my daughter, Keisha, will email her and say, hey, could you call this person and we need to get clarification on this? And so it actually ends up working great. And the thing that I've found is that with working with them, I see their true strength. It's a different dynamic than raising them. When you're working with them, you go, they're pretty fabulous at that.
Yes, they are.
And so you do start to see them in a different light. With my sister, it's been awesome because I think our relationship has gotten stronger because we communicate so much more than we would otherwise. And, with our lives being so busy, I actually have 8 siblings. So wow. We could go on and on with that.
I was going to say, Angie, you've got room for growth.
I got room for growth. But it's been awesome because with my other siblings, I'm so busy. I don't have much time to speak with other siblings. So she works with me. We've gotten closer because we have, a daily communication. And in that communication, we do keep up with each other's personal life. So that's been awesome. I would say the downfall that I have found that working with family is vacations are really hard. Because when we go on vacation, my daughter wants to go on vacation. My son wants to go on vacation. So when we go on vacation, the office goes. And that has been really, really challenging.
Yeah.
That's probably the hardest thing that I have to deal with is the away time.
Yeah, that is a very good point. We'll have to circle back on. All right,
Yeah.
Melissa, how has the dynamic, and this is your stepdaughter, so how has it been, wonderful and brought you closer? Has it changed the dynamic between the relationship? What have you learned by working with your stepdaughter?
I'm sitting here listening to Angie and I'm going, oh my gosh, that's me. That's me. Me too. Me too. I mean, we're literally right now, we're in the middle of the whole vacation discussion for when we go down to Vision Summit in Florida. I'm like, I want Ellie to go, but she's got a man in the office. So, as far as our dynamics, I definitely believe that it has strengthened our relationship without a doubt. I loved what Angie said about being able to see them in from a different perspective, to see her as a woman, to see her grown. She actually just recently moved out into her own apartment with her bestie, and they're doing the whole oh, I'm early 20s, and I'm like, you go. And so it's nice. And we, before she started, I made sure to set those clear boundaries and clear expectations that, yes, I'm mom, and yes, I'm boss, which I guess when you're mom, you're always boss, right? But, in this, in this aspect, this is where I'm at. And so the other thing that I told her, and I'm sure a lot of people have had the same conversation, is, whether you like it or not, you're going to be held to a different standard, a stricter, higher standard in my mind. Because of course, I think that's what we do for our children anyway, is we expect them. But, I don't ever want there to be any sort of misinterpretation. And it was the same thing with my mom and I, and I think as far as the relationships outside of the business and inside of the business, I don't know. I came from a really enmeshed type of family. And so, and having my parents own their own business, the business was just another person at the dinner table, if that makes sense.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense, Melissa.
Yeah, it's just always there. So our conversations could go from, oh my gosh, look what I got for, so-and-so for Christmas. I'm super excited. And then, oh, hey, did you get that report while I'm thinking about it? Yeah, I did. Okay, cool. So now, it's just, that's the way it is. And I know that not everybody has that. I mean, I love what Corrina said, where she can recognize within children, that her daughter is more compartmentalized. She has to be able to have that start-stop mentality. Whereas Deshaun, and I've met Deshaun, he's terrific. And yeah, he can just kind of go from whatever and do whatever. And so I think as long as we recognize that, and make the most of it, that's what I've done. And I've enjoyed it. I get to see my daughter every single day. It's awesome. And my mom.
Wow. You get a lot of glory there. And you know what Angie just said about her sister. I mean, I know that's the way I feel. I'm like, there is no greater gift of a mother that, sure, our kids could be off living somewhere else, right, in their own apartments or their own homes or anything, but every single day we have a reason to not just check in on them, but to have great conversations and to watch them excel, to be so proud of them, right? I mean, it's great when your child calls you and says, hey, Mom, I've got a new project, but you don't really understand their business, right? If they're an engineer somewhere, it's like, oh, I'm proud of you, but you don't really understand. When they're working through an issue or they're bringing that family home, they're working on, a difficulty through a file and they're able to solve for it and make a difference and have that impact. You know what that feels like. But now I want to tie in being mom. Okay, there's a difference. And I know, and I've even spoken about this before, especially I can even speak of this, that because I have boys, and so Corrina, you can relate to this. Sometimes when it's a male and they find out they work for their mother, the dynamic is different because it's almost like it's okay to work for your father's business. But when it's your mommy's business, it's almost a step down for a male figure. I don't understand this, but I can tell you I've witnessed it firsthand. So, especially Corrina, because I know your son works for you. Have you ever run into this, and how do you deal with this, and what do we do as those moms, right? Of, like you said, we're always the boss ladies here. How do you deal with that separation of mom and boss?
So I'll tell you, for each of them, it's different because the same thing is recognizing what their strengths are, is what Angie said, and compartmentalize where Nicole is starting to stop. Deshaun has more of that dude theory where I say he's not emotionally attached to anything, and Nicole is that emotional part. So how I direct things to him on what needs to be done is different than I direct them to her. So because of how they relate to me as mom boss. Now for Deshaun, coming out of college and working for his mom, it was a little bit of what I think you're going at there, Laura, is more like, oh, you're going to work for your mom. Will you really be doing anything? You know what I mean? Is that like, what are you going to really be doing there? And are you going to really be doing anything? In the first year or year and a half, he really had to take that with stride with one, I think his friends, and then all the seniors here. Like, he didn't know a whole lot. So he took it upon himself to learn pretty much everything to where now I have to tell them he doesn't know everything. Don't go to him for everything because he is not the all be all, So, so he surpassed where I thought he should be and also where they thought he was not doing anything to surpass them. So for him, now it's more or less, I get like, I'm the old schooler and I get more or less his friends saying, oh yeah, Deshaun runs his mom's company, So, I mean, so
awesome.
it's almost opposite of like, oh no, instead of he's going to work for his mom, Deshaun runs his mom's company. I said, well, he's not the only one here. So, but directing and delegating to both of them was different in their starts, in their first 2-year journeys with me. And I think that's recognizing, like the lady said, like Melissa, the strengths, the weaknesses for each party, what it's going to be and what do they like to do. Because my daughter, for like Angie, she can relate to all the employees, but she does not like dealing with the customers, as far as the phone conversations goes. Now she'll woo everybody for everything else. And Deshaun is opposite. He's tell them exactly what you need to tell them. Don't drag it out. Don't poop on it. Don't do nothing. Just say exactly what you need to say and move on. You know what I mean? Don't sit there and just dwell on it too long. Just go. And now he's got that non-emotional tie to where I have to almost rein him back in and say, okay, this is why they're saying this, or this is where they are. And, he's kind of surpassed that and just cuts it pretty cut and dry. So I think it's definitely, you have to figure out exactly what their strengths and weaknesses are, exactly how they're going to be relatable to you as far as the mom boss. And for both of my kids, it's definitely different. They relate to me differently. And like Melissa, I love the way she said, I mean, the business has always had a seat at the dinner table.
I love that.
And that's a problem for half of my family, but then the other half kind of says, hey, what's going on? So, but people do get tired of it. but yet you do have the ones that can just say, okay, what did you get done? Did you do this? And then we're moving on to dessert, and not everyone can do that. And that's like living, working, breathing, eating with your family. 24/7. So, our office is our family, to where I haven't strayed away from hiring family members. So we have sisters that work here. Deshaun has a title company. He has sisters that work there. So, so there's different things that we've now taken into how we related to each other on working with our family to also building our family. Like Angie has a whole nother branch that she can build, right? and what that looks like. Yeah. So I think each one's different. So working with your mom is never perfect, and I'm never perfect, and I'm never 100% right, but we try to guide them the best way we know how, right?
Agree. So Angie, we know the pluses, right? We've spoken about the glory part, the great things, and I'm going to ask each one of you, what was something that you actually learned where maybe you didn't have it go properly, exactly how you wanted it to turn out with working with family? Something where you look back and you're like, all right, I'm going to tweak that a little bit. I'm going to change how I approach that. What would be a piece of advice or something where it didn't turn out how you expected and you needed to adjust?
And that's for me?
Yep.
Okay. So my big thing is I didn't have contracts in the beginning. With my loan officer, my sister, whatever. I just we verbally talked about what the pay would be, and I'm just not a real, I have to have a contract. I just didn't feel that was necessary. But after some time and misunderstandings and things like that, then that was really not a smart idea. So then I went back and we typed up an employee contract that stated what our expectations were. And I also let them know that, they were free to move on if they wanted. Like, if this is not what they want to do, they don't need to feel this obligation to me that I'm going to be upset or be offended if they decide this doesn't work for them. And I think having that contract in place, that was the key, because it set very, very clear expectations. And, I even still to this day, because this business is hard and it's emotional. And my daughter, she's such a sweetheart. That's the good side. The negative side is she takes things like, it really affects her. And sometimes I just think, oh, can she do this for the rest of her life? This is hard work. And emotionally, it's hard work. So, so
Angie, let me ask you a question there, because, and I can again appreciate this. I think we all can, right? I know I've been in this situation. So let me ask you if you have. Have you been in a situation where you're watching your daughter emotionally be affected, and as mom, you want to approach it as mom, but yet you also have the business and you're also looking at it as broker owner and as boss. And in one regard, you're thinking with this side of the brain, and then you got this side of the brain. And of course, as mom, you just want to fix and you just want to help and you want to tell her it's okay. And I'm sure you do that, but you also have the business side. So how do you approach that? How do you deal with that personally?
That is really hard, because first and foremost is mom. That's what comes out, and if there's a client or an insurance agent or a title agent that's just completely out of line, my first instinct is, give me his number. I'm giving him a piece of my mind. Like, no,
and I think we all can relate to that. I think we all can relate to that.
I'm like, give me that number. And then my daughter's the one that has to bring me down and say, no, mom, it's okay. I'll get over it. I'll just learn that I have to do this with that agent or that with that agent. So she's usually the one that brings me back from being the mama bear to, okay, this is a business. I can't attack every agent that's rude. So we, go back to business as usual. And she kind of actually takes me from being a mom to being a business owner. And then my son, he can handle anything on his own. He's fairly new. He's, I would say, 3-4 months into business, but he, so we're still kind of learning the dynamics there, but so far it's been great.
Oh, that's awesome. I love your advice about the contract, because that is a good point, right? Sometimes here we are, we're like, well, it's family, right? It's family. We know exactly what we're going to offer here, but you're right. You have to make sure that everything is spelled out. You have to think exactly the same, regardless if it's family or whether it's not. So having everything spelled out, having clear, defined, duties and expectations, and of course, taking care of their pay. Oh, that's great, great advice. All right, Melissa, I want to hear the same thing. How do you separate that, mama bear versus, the business side? And what is something that maybe you've learned? I mean, you've been having a family business dynamic your whole life. You must have learned many different things. So what would be something that maybe you would like to share with someone that is thinking of bringing family in?
Sure. I mean, I tell people, like, the first time I was ever fired in my life, I was fired by my grandma, which is true.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I was like 10.
Wait, I think I have to hear that. Why did you get fired by grandma?
So another family business. So again, like I said, we've always had family businesses, and one of them that has been the best experiences of my life was when we owned, my grandparents started it's a melodrama theater and a restaurant attached to the side of it. And it was great. Every summer we did that. And so my job was to I was like a busser, a table busser. And so I remember one time speaking of which, speaking of which, this is what I'm working from home. Sorry. So I remember one time what happened was I decided to go to the state fair instead of do my job. And I walked in, and my grandmother looked at me and she said, "Melissa?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "You lost your job today." And I was like, okay. So anyway, I mean, yeah, my first experience at like 10 being fired. But anyway, as far as, if people are considering it, and I actually have had people that have asked me, I've said it's not for everybody. Again, it's something that you have to be able to really look at, as a whole. And things that I have learned is to not make assumptions. That's a big thing. I know that when you're working with a family dynamic, you have that, as we've talked about, that home side and that family side, and then you have that work side. And so sometimes those things can become intermingled, and it gets kind of tough. For example, if a family member does a certain thing and it kind of, takes you off guard, or it rubs you a different way and you're not really sure, it's easy to have that family side of you kick in and go, "Oh, I know what this person's doing." We've all done that before in some way, shape, or form. And then what happens is we stew over it. And, we can do this with non-related employees, but I think it's compounded when you have a family member. Mm-hmm. And so I've learned the hard way of hanging on to things, not saying anything for fear of hurting a family member, because I've also worked with aunts and uncles and cousins before. I mean, there's a long line of this, and making those assumptions. And of course, as we know, anytime you make those assumptions and we withhold communication, it always comes out in some way, shape, or form. And then when it does, there's this big dramatic thing. And then it was like, well, why didn't you just say something?
Yep.
And I think that's a rule of thumb with anybody. But again, if you're considering looking at hiring a family member, you do have to realize that those feelings can be compounded. So, keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, that is a really good point, because you're right? We're going back to this person as a child, right? Where you're like, oh, well, he's always done that, or she's always been that way. You can't go into it the same as any team member that you have. You can't make those assumptions. Now, what I think is one of the blessings of working with family is you can be very honest. You can be extremely clear and extremely open in terms of this can't happen. This is not going to happen. And Melissa, you brought up a good point. Sometimes people think that working with family, it's easier on the person. It's actually usually much more difficult. They usually are held to a higher standard, and they are going to be the person that maybe at midnight, you're not reaching out to your team member at midnight if something's gone wrong. But if it's your family member, they're getting the call at midnight because it has to get done. So there definitely is a totally different dynamic that happens with that. All right. I love that advice. And I love the story about grandma. So thank you for sharing because, but Melissa, that like set up your whole life, right? Of how you,
oh my goodness.
Right?
Yes. My grandmother, my aunt, my mother, they always had this look. There was the look. I mean, anybody
I think we all have that look.
Oh
right?
yeah. You know, the look, but it did. I mean, I started working in our family restaurant at 9 years old. And I keep telling my kids, are you kidding me? When I was your age, I was busting tables and I sound like my mother, but it did. It set that foundation and framework for my whole life to be able to see also both sides of it. Whereas, you know, I feel extremely fortunate, extremely blessed in that I have had this different perspective and different view of my parents, of my grandparents, of my family, and what they are able to do outside of the home. Whereas I had friends that, you know, mom and dad, or just dad or whoever, just mom went to work and came home, went to work and came home. And they never saw that. And so, you know, when it comes to struggle and conflict resolution and putting pride into something that belongs to you and making sure that what you represent to other people is true and authentic, you know, that I learned from watching my family, from working with my family, and, you know, having them constantly throw little, you know, anecdotes and different, you know, like, I don't know, just, you know, analogies into life and into work and everything. It really did. I can't imagine not having grown up with a business like this. And I know it's not for everybody, but for those that are considering it, it can be life-changing and it can be the most incredible ride you've ever been on.
Agreed. All right, Corrina, Angie, any final piece of advice, tip, insights, anything else you want to leave the audience with? Go ahead, Corrina.
I think it gives you, I'll tag team on that as far as what Melissa said, as far as, you know, just being really blessed to have worked with family. The sense of security it gives me that I can provide for 4 generations versus them have to go out and be what I consider in the real world, you know. It definitely gives you that pride and that sense of accomplishment as far as what we're doing, and that we do have to give them a choice, though. Like Angie said, if it's not for them, it's not for everybody. But in meantime, it gives me a sense of, okay, I can provide this for my family. You know, now they just have to be okay with coming along with the ride, you know, and that ride is not for everybody. So I think just feeling that sense of accomplishment for ourselves as women and what we can do for our family, that tags team back on what Laura said, is it is different when you go work for your mom. Is like, do you really get that kudos, you know, or that attaboy, you know, that now my son does get, but, you know, he really had to work hard to earn it. But now I have to work harder to now get it back from him to a degree.
I love that. I love that. That is awesome. All right, Angie, you're going to wrap us up. What's that final piece of advice, that final tip, insight that you'd like to share?
I just think I think the best thing about working with family is just seeing them grow and seeing their accomplishments and the ability to help. Like my sister, that's my loan officer, she was kind of in a tough situation when she came to me, and just to see how much she's progressed and how much this business has benefited her life, that is the best part of being in business with family, is seeing their growth and their weaknesses become strengths, or what they perceive their weaknesses to be become strengths, because you can point out to them that is not a weakness, that is your strength, and you need to look at that differently. And that's my favorite thing about working with family.
That's awesome. And once again, it's the reason why we love our industry so much, right? As women, as leaders, we not only get to make a difference in the lives of the people that we serve and the families, but look at what we can also do for our own families. Ladies, you're awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. This has been amazing. Hope everyone had a wonderful Mother's Day yesterday. Thank you for joining us for another episode of AIME's Women's Mortgage Network's Growth Series. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.